and right next to it was PlayStation 1 games, pirated games you could buy. Vanuatu is probably a little bit behind Asia, but the piracy is definitely there. Peer-to-peer is obviously an issue for us. I would suggest that your digital rights management successes is probably better than ours, but it is obviously something we do have in common. So, obviously we're two creative industries. Even though the music industry's had a longer lifespan, the gaming industry's obviously had exponential growth in Australia in the last 10 to 20 years, and still in that time, one thing that our two industries really haven't had is a lot of dialogue together. Music and gaming works together, yet our two industries haven't really chatted about how we can help each other. That's one reason why Tony's got us here, to try and open that door so we can chat about our two industries and see how we can work together. So my project, Need Music, how does it work and what happens? Is it too expensive? Is it too difficult? Important to remember, as I mentioned earlier, there are 2 copyrights when you're licensing a track for a project. It's not always the recording artist who is the composer. Now, thankfully, that's more a pop phenomenon, and I'm not sure if a lot of our local games are going to contain pop songs by Britney Spears anyway. So, thankfully, a lot of the local indie artists do write and record their own material. And the other important thing is it's not always the same organisation that owns the master recording that owns the publishing. So is it too difficult? In many cases, sadly, yes it is. It doesn't sound like I'm selling our industry too well, but the honest truth is in many cases it is. The difficulties I've tried to categorise for you guys can be price, can be clearance, can be time constraint, and it can be you bastards won't let me have that hit song difficulties. In terms of pricing for a song within a game, so how long is a piece of string? There's a lot of parameters. What I thought I'd do is provide you with some examples from the US and then bring it back to the Australian market. Now, through our US sub-publisher, we've had a lot of our unknown bands into online games out of the US, and that still generates a healthy amount of money for the composers here for those projects out of the US. To use an unknown Australian band, it's been a total of $3,000 generated for that sort of project. If you look at unknown Australian bands in some of the bigger projects, we've recently looking to confirm a local Melbourne band who've been around for a while called Magic Dirt, who are going to be involved in a Grand Theft Auto game coming up. I'm not sure if it's the South Caulfield one that Michael was talking about. When one of those games wants to use one of our unknown songs from the Antipodes, the other part of the world, it's still generating between $3,000 to $5,000 for each of the 2 copyrights. So the important thing is that, and sorry, there's occasionally royalty structures. The SingStar games also work on a royalty structure. Actually, sorry, the Magic Dirt track I think is Guitar Hero. I think that's where that one is. So, based on Australian development budgets, does that mean music is out of the question? Many of the bigger international acts do expect those sort of fees, and it's a similar challenge that the Australian film and television industry face, where if they're after a big name act and they need to clear world rights, now that same act can get a song in an American film and get tens and tens of thousands of dollars, whereas we don't in the film and TV world, and obviously we don't have those budgets in Australia. So it can mean that bigger international acts are out of the question. Not all of them, but some of them. However, Australian music composers and Australian music industry companies have realistic expectations of what fees can be generated for their artists, and that doesn't matter what production industry you're in, whether it be film, TV or advertising or gaming. We are more realistic because we're from this part of the world and we know that the budgets are restrictive compared to the rest of the world. Hence, do not rule out all music based on budget, and that's where dialogue is very important. Just because you don't think you can afford the big name act doesn't mean you shouldn't talk to some of things within the industry, within our industry, sorry, to see if you can come up with other options. Clearance difficulties, I mentioned the 2 copyrights, different companies, different owners, songwriters and recording artists. It's impossible. That can be an issue. But thankfully, as I said before, that's mostly pop scenarios. Most cutting-edge indie-style artists, composers write their own material. So when you are clearing the copyrights, you are ending up with the same artist. And via the Mushroom Group's resources and diversity, we have access to a large catalogue of music where we control both copyrights. So what that means is if you're looking for a song, you can just come to us and we can provide both licenses. As a producer, that is the easiest way to go, because then you know straight up the possibilities. You don't have to go to another party and wait for someone else to get back to you. It's what we call the one-stop shop. Time constraint difficulties. Any use of music is subject to artist approval. You won't find us just putting songs here, there and everywhere, so we do need to chat to our artists. It means that you won't necessarily get a 24-hour turnaround. So music should never be the last thing that you think of. I can't get that massive hit song that I wanted. Difficulties. Don't give up and head to library music, whatever you do. It sounds terrible. The volume of music releases out there outweighs the avenue for public exposure in radio and TV. Sadly, Australian commercial radio plays a very small proportion of music that is released. They're very conservative about what they will play. And even there's a limit to the amount of MySpace sites that people can actually surf for. So there is quality music out there that your production team and design team may not have been exposed to. Hence, come back to that word again, dialogue. And I told Tony I was going to say it 40 times at least in the presentation. So why deal with Mushroom? No one knows our catalogue like we do. There are hidden gems that might be suitable for your project. We've got access to new artists. We know when their new releases are. We get to hear them beforehand. We get to pick up on instrumental versions, and I'll give you an example of how an instrumental versions come into play shortly. Now, the other thing, another reason to deal with this is our team. There's a half a dozen musical tastes, various ages, various styles of people. We've got the cool tastemakers who go out to bands every night, and then we've got dweebs like myself who sit in the office and do the more business things, the daggy business realists. They're a team of people who can go through our catalogue, who know our songs, who can suggest songs for projects. Another reason to come to us is go beyond your musical knowledge. One of the things we find with a lot of film and TV producers is they are solely dealing with their own CD catalogues or their own CD collections at home. Dealing with us is, it just allows you to get more ideas, more music ideas on the table. So if you don't have a sound designer, get input from those within our industry. User-friendly licensing. The thing about independent companies versus the majors in the music industry is we can't afford to let opportunities get lost in red tape, so we can turn things over quicker and we do get the job done. It's not a 6-person process to get a clearance. We've got the large catalogue of both copyrights material, and translating that into the real world. TV shows like Home and Away, Neighbours, Out of the Blue, I've mentioned, even going back to The Secret Life of Us, they have exclusive relationships with us where they only use our commercially released music. The reason why they do that is because they're such a quick turnover, they need the professionalism, they've got the time constraints, they need the job done properly, so that's why they come to us. Realistic suggestions, sorry. If you come to us and ask for a song, because we know our songwriters, we can tell you if it's likely to be possible or not possible. The worst thing you can do as a designer or a producer is get yourself sold on a piece of music that you may not be able to have. And if you've got to wait weeks for a clearance, it's sure as hell better to have some instant feedback. So we know what our songwriters like to do and whether or not they're likely to be involved in a project. We're open to dialogue. I think I've mentioned that word before. Now, price-wise, it's not as scary as you think. I mentioned those US ones before, not to make everyone run for the door because they know that they can't afford the songs. come to us and chat.